Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli back out in the shop with a brand new video for you today. And in today's shop, we're going to be talking about a technique that is perfect for when the fish are in cold water conditions. And in today's shop, we're going to talk about the metal blade bait, but not normal blade baiting. Specifically, today's shop is going to be all about using a blade bait shallow in the cold water conditions. You know, when you look at a blade bait, that is very synonymous with fishing cold water. But when you think about it, traditionally, we're fishing that blade bait deep, right? We're fishing it 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 feet deep for wintertime cold water fish. But it's interesting because about 10 years ago, I realized that that metal blade bait is just as effective in shallow water conditions, especially when the water is cold. So the thing I love about this shallow water blade bait fishing, especially when it's cold, is that it's underfished. It's a technique where even on a lake that's getting heavy pressure, or a river or a reservoir that's getting heavy pressure, nobody's throwing a blade bait shallow. And it is just as effective, if not more effective, than when you fish it deep. We're going to start this by talking about some of the baits, the hook configuration, the sizes, and then we're going to get into the way that we're going to fish it, the rod and the reel, how to incorporate all that stuff for this more niche specialty thing that we're going to call shallow water blade baiting, okay? Let's start with the baits themselves. And the baits themselves are very traditional blade bait style lures, okay? You know, when you look at these baits, they're basically fish-shaped lures. They have, a lot of them have 2 or 3 or 4 holes in the back of the bait. And then you've got just a little snap or a little swivel that attaches to those holes, okay? So whatever your favorite blade bait is, there's a lot of them on the market right now. The original, if you're an old person like me, you remember the good old Silver Buddy blade bait. But, you know, a lot of these newer ones, they're sort of like just more tricked out versions, right? You know, they're more realistic, they're more balanced, the vibration's better. And the one that I'm using for my shallow blade bait fishing is a bait by Molix called a Trago Vibe, okay? But here's the deal, and I want to make sure that this is like a big bullet point for you when fishing a blade bait shallow. By the way, before I even get into that, when I'm talking about shallow blade baiting, I'm talking about 10 foot of water or less. And many a times, guys, I'm really talking shallow. 2, 3, 4, 5 feet of water, right? So this is what I'm considering shallow. But when I'm picking my blade bait, I don't care what brand you use, we're going to go with a blade bait that has a lighter weight to it, okay? You know, most blade baits, when you think about it, you're thinking about the 1/2 ounce version. Very good size if you're fishing deep. If you're fishing extra deep, 40, 30, 40, 50, 3/4, 1 ounce blade bait. But shallow, we want to use a 1/4 ounce or less, okay? Again, this is a specialty deal. So 1/4 ounce or less. I love the 1/4. The 1/4 is a great size. And I'm really in love with the 3/16, okay? So smaller baits, the 1/4 and the 3/16 are perfect for that 0 to 10 feet, 10 foot or less, okay? So we want to definitely use lighter baits, okay? We don't need that big heavy bait. And you're going to see why as we talk about the technique. All right, the next thing on shallow blade baiting is the hook configuration, okay? A lot of the blade baits that you see, especially the ones that are more old school the ones that are produced by companies here in the United States, a lot of them have treble hooks on them. But because we're going to be fishing this blade bait shallow, and shallow a lot of times, you know what that means. That means cover. It means wood, sticks, brush, rock, weeds, remnants of weeds, slime, black death, right? Because we're fishing it shallow, for this shallow blade baiting technique, I really prefer the blade baits that have the frog hooks on them. And if you look at them, they're two-pronged hooks, right? So they're not trebles, they're not tri-point. They've got two sets of prongs on them. But this is a great demo, guys. Look, literally, if I did that with the treble hook, it sticks in my hand. When I do it with the frog style hooks, just glides over, okay? So I really prefer the blade baits that have the two prongs and there isn't a snagging point on the belly. You'd be surprised at what kind of cover we're going to be able to fish this blade bait through shallow without getting snagged, okay? So 1/4 ounce, 3/16, perfect sizes. Hook configuration for sure. The double prong frog hooks, the Molix baits all have those for sure. And then on color, guys, I want to make sure I address this, is that keep it really, really simple, okay? At the end of the day, if you had a silver blade bait and a gold blade bait, you've got everything you need, right? But even with additional colors, I'm keeping it really, really simple. I've got some silvers and pearls to imitate baitfish. I've got some fire tiger and perch colors to imitate perch and bluegill. And you know, last but not least, I like in the cold water period to carry a few red baits as well. I like that red color. So stick to the natural colors. You don't need a lot of different crazy colors. All right, shallow water blade baiting, 1/4 ounce or less, natural colors, double prong frog hooks, okay? Let's jump into the rod, the reel, and the line first, and then I'm going to show you how to fish these baits. This setup is going to be really, really important, guys. You know I go over the rod and reel line on a lot of these techniques, but on this one, this is really, really important. So I want you to pay attention. So when we're shallow water blade bait fishing, we want to use a spinning rod, okay? This is a spinning rod technique. You're going to see why in a second. But we want to use a shorter spinning rod, okay? So here it goes. 6 foot to 7 foot medium heavy spinning. I'm going to say it again. You ready for shallow water blade baiting? 6 foot to a 7 foot medium heavy rod. My absolute favorite, guys, this is one that I've been using. You can tell with all the mud on the rod. This is the 6.6 medium heavy Abu Garcia Ike series rod. I love the 6.6. It's the perfect length. All right, I know what you're thinking. Why 6.6? Why 6 foot? Why a shorter rod? And guys, when we start to fish this bait, I'm going to show you in a second, we don't want this lure to leave the bottom in giant hops. So to counter that movement of it moving too far up and away, we're going to use a shorter rod, right? Guys, this is simple mathematics. The longer the rod, when we do a little with our wrist, the longer rod pulls that bait higher and it actually makes me move faster. When I have a shorter spinning rod and I go, it shortens up the length of that hop and it slows me down, right? Longer rod, faster, shorter rod, slower, and smaller movements, okay? So 6 foot to 7 foot medium heavy rod. Guys, on reel, Just a nice middle of the road gear ratio spinning reel. A 30 or a 3000 size is perfect. 6.2 to 1, 6.8 to 1, something like that. You don't need ultra high speed, just middle of the road gear ratio. That's the brand new Ike series by Abu Garcia in the 3000 size. And last but not least, guys, the line. And the line is so important on this shallow blade baiting because we're going to be fishing it around cover and we want a little lift in the bait. We don't want rapid fall in the bait. We want a little lift or a little parachute effect. So because of that, guys, we're going to use a little heavier braid than what you normally use on a spinning rod. For shallow blade baiting, we're going to use 15 to 20 pound braid on that spinning reel. I love the 15. The 15's perfect. A lot of strength if I'm fishing around heavy cover, but also it's thin enough that it's going to let that bait get down. But here's the key, guys. I'm going to use a really short leader, and that's actually probably the longest I would go. That's probably 2 feet. But I'm going to go 24 inches or less on a heavier leader of fluorocarbon. And that's there really to help that bait just vibrate, right? We want to have maximum vibration. So we want just a little length of fluorocarbon, but just like a braid, it's going to be heavier. 12 to 20 pound fluorocarbon leader. I really, really like the 12 or 15 pound is perfect. And it's going to allow that bait to vibrate, but give us a lot of strength if we hook a big one, okay? So braid to a short floor leader, everything a little heavier than you would normally use, okay? Guys, that combo's key. If that rod's too light or too long, if that fluorocarbon leader's too long or you're using 6 or 8 or 10 pound braid, you're really not gonna have this same ability to do what we're gonna do with this bait, okay? All right, now let's get to fishing this bait. We're really gonna use this bait shallow in the same areas you would normally fish shallow in cold water periods. Guys, remember, shallow is a word that's sort of a weird, strange word because a bass will live shallow in the winter, but he's hardly ever going to be on that real shallow, ultra flat stuff. Fish in the cold water period, whether it's late fall, dead of winter, late winter, even the early spring, guys, they're going to be on those breaks that have a little more depth to them, okay? So I'm fishing shallow, but I'm fishing shallow where there's a little 45, 60, 80 degree angle to the bank, okay? So instead of a bank that's ultra flat for miles, I'm fishing shallow, but where that water has a little break to it, a little depth change. I'm targeting cover with this lure shallow that I can see with my eyes, and I'm targeting cover that I can see with my electronics. Let's start with the eyes. When I'm fishing a shallow blade bait, give you a good example on some of the tidal water that I fish. I'm fishing it around pilings, seawalls, docks. I'm fishing it around wrecks, barges that I can see, right? Riprap embankment, a dam, a causeway, bridge pilings, right? Even shallow, I'm fishing around cover I can see with my eyes. But man, when you use this in conjunction with sonar, 2D side imaging, especially forward facing, this thing can be deadly because we're able to see that cover, right? And put that bait right on it every time. And the technique for this shallow blade bait fishing, guys, is real simple. And I want to show you, I'm going to basically do one movement as I fish this bait back, and then I'm just going to kind of mix it up with 2 little different retrieves that I do until I figure out what the fish want, okay? So let's just go to the first example. We're fishing a piling that I can see with my eyes, okay? And I'm always going to cast a little past the piling. Let's say this piling is at 5, 6 feet of water, and I'm going to cast past the piling and let that blade bait sink to the bottom. Boom. I'm following my line as it falls. As soon as it hits the bottom, my line bellows out. And you heard me say it before, but guys, shallow blade baiting is all about little hops. So as soon as it hits the bottom, like literally it hits the bottom, I watch it hit the bottom, and I'm just going to go. And if you think about rod positioning, I'm going from about 3 o'clock to no more than 1. Really almost like 2. So 3 o'clock to 1 or 2 o'clock, and then follow my slack by reeling it. Boom, hits the bottom. Back down. Back down. And when you see it on forward facing, if you're using electronics, when you see it, it's really unbelievable the way that this thing hits and then rises. It vibrates almost like a chatterbait or a rattle trap as you lift, right? But little lift. 3 to 2, 3 to 1. And when you lift, it comes off the bottom, vibrates super tight, and as it falls, it wanders back down. Guys, that wandering of the bait is really one of the keys, right? So, falls back down, falls back down. And every time this bait hits the bottom, it's making a little commotion, just a little puff, okay? A little, and that's really a big trigger for the fish. A lot of the bites you get, hear me on this one, a lot of the bites you get will come when you go to lift that blade bait back up. And I've seen it so many times now that we're utilizing forward facing. I've seen it so many times where the fish follows it up, they see the vibration, and then as it starts to wander away and fall away from them, they go down and eat it. And when you go to make your next lift, right? Remember, it's little lifts, right? It's as you go to make your next lift, boom, he's got it. Or you feel weight and you literally just kind of continue with that pull and you've got them hooked. So a lot of them, 75% of them are going to hit it as the bait falls back down. That wandering effect, okay? And it's just as effective in shallow water as it is in deep. All right, now here's the 2 variations, guys, on retrieves. And you really, like jerkbait fishing, you really sort of have to pay attention to your bites to figure out the right way to manipulate those fish. Now, for the guys that are using forward facing, you're going to see it take place right in front of you, okay? Even in shallow water. Forward facing is just as good in 3 to 6 foot of water as it is in 30. But those little, if you're not getting bit on that traditional retrieve, here are the 2 ways to really get that fish to bite. And the first one I love because the first one is making that hop higher. So if I'm doing my normal retrieve and I'm 3 to 2, 3 to 1, if I'm doing that and I'm not getting bit, about every 5th or 6th time, I'm going to throw a little bit bigger hop into it. So I'm going to go from 3 all the way up to about 12 o'clock. And just that little difference, imagine that fish, he's following it. And everything's the same. And then all of a sudden, about every 5th, 6th, 7th hop, you go all the way to 12. And it just really shoots and falls. That little change can be a trigger. So my first alteration is making a big hop in between every 5th or 6th or 7th hop, okay? A lot of times you'll trigger them. Watch it on forward facing sonar. You'll see the fish following. You go on your 6th hop, make it a big one to 12, follow it back down, boom, fish eats it on the fall, okay? The second one, and guys, this one is one that is so surprising because it's shallow, and you would think in your mind that this one's not going to work, but it does. And the second one is, instead of a bigger hop, we're going to let the bait sit. We're going to dead stick the bait for a couple extra seconds, okay? But we're going to do the same thing. We're going to throw it out there next to the piling, next to the rock, next to the stump that we see on forward facing. We're going to always cast a little past it. We're going to go 3 to 1, 3 to 2. This time about every 5th or 6th little pull. When we get to our 6th or 7th pull, I'm going to, boom, let it hit the bottom, and I'm going to let it sit. I'm going to count about 3 to 5 seconds, and then get back to my little pulls. So this one's doing the opposite, right? And I've seen it so many times on this forward facing that the fish are following it, and they're just sort of behind it, and I stop it, hits the mud sort of bellows out, the gravel, the silt. That fish is looking at it. He's like, that's an easy meal. 3, 4 seconds of it sitting there, he goes down and literally sucks it off the bottom, right? He thinks it's a crawfish or a minnow or a shad or a shiner that's died or that's injured. It's an easy meal, and he eats it off the bottom, okay? So those little hops, that's really the key to the shallow water blade baiting. You don't want to put all big movements into it, but alter it by using one big hop every 6th or 7th pull, or every 6th or 7th pull, let that blade bait dead stick on the bottom. It's pretty phenomenal, just that little difference in that movement, how it's going to trigger these fish to bite. Guys, if you cold water fish, again, late fall, winter, late winter, even pre-spawn, early spring, if you like metal blade bait fishing, but you only do it deep, you got to give this a try. Shallow water blade baiting, they don't see it a lot, and it's a phenomenal technique when the water's cold. Guys, I hope you like these videos. If you like what you're watching, subscribe to the channel. There's a button right down there. Just hit the button. When you subscribe, we're going to send you notifications and deals and all sorts of stuff. And we've got a new piece of content dropping every single week. If you're already subscribed, tell your friends about Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. We're here to help you hopefully become a better angler. Try that out in cold water, even shallow, and you're going to get bit. Bye. Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli out in the shop. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, you have to check out that one, and I hope you like them.